Is Canada the country we think or we hope it is?
They said they won't let me leave unless they have my lobsters.
No, but you can be better.
Warning, the following program contains extreme coarse language and mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is extremely advised.
How's it going? It's ADC. It's Talking Truth Thursday. And like, subscribe, all that stuff across the board. And support the show at the co-fi.com/talkingtruth. And we're going to bring in our guest this week. We're talking truth on systemic injustice. And we have Brad Glant on. Brad, how are you doing this evening?
I'm not too bad.
And we just did a little teaser of your documentary, Systemic Injustice. Why? I guess the first question: why the documentary? Where did you start on that, and where are you at with it now?
Well, I started. I was asked to speak. I submitted to speak at a sociology conference on the Center for Sociology and Race and Olympic Studies Research Center in Fullerton, California, after we signed the deal with Mississauga. And I was supposed to keep it to a 20-minute presentation. And I was very much unable to do that. And so I put together the PowerPoint, and I was trying to explain to people why mascots are not just sports, but they're an indication of a culture of Indigenous racism. Because it's just an indication of the fact that basic human dignity isn't provided to Indigenous people in Canada. And you can't chalk it up to you are honoring us, or we got other important issues, which was mentioned to me by an elder at a prominent university in Toronto just 2 weeks ago. This defines, if you allow these to continue, you define the acceptability of indignity for Indigenous people. And if you stop people, and if you're able to convince people to, hey, what you're doing is not good, then perhaps they'll be more willing to listen to other issues. because if you look at Winnipeg, the police in Toronto spent months looking for one of the people killed by the serial killer a couple of years ago, and they've been searching for a year, and they won't search for at least 4 Indigenous women in Winnipeg. And it's clear in Canada, if you pay attention, that Indigenous life is not valued the same as other Canadian lives. You can go through CBC talks. It's supposedly this left-wing organization, all touchy-feely, a bunch of virtue signalers, but they broadcast the Blackhawks games whenever it's good for their business.
Right.
And they did a story on racism in hockey and featured the Blackhawks. And the writer won an award for it. And if you look at it, it's just like, what's going on here? There's something more to it. And that's what I was trying to explain to people. Plus, I wanted to get away from it.
Yep.
My strategies were fairly effective. And I know that other people will take a chance and will get involved. And if they understand what I've done, they will perhaps learn from them. And they will improve. And Mr. Jesco has said ongoing genocide. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
It's not, tactics have changed. So I'm from Newfoundland. And while I don't appear Indigenous, most of my people are about 50 to 60% of the people in my family, large Catholic families, 54 first cousins, but half do. And our great-grandmother on my mother's side, who was differing stories, she was born in Labrador, across where the Montaignais and the French fought the Inuit for control of Labrador, the last battle near Battle Harbor. She may have been both Cree and Inuit. And most of my family on mom's side has that Inuit appearance. Very dark skin, dark hair. And that's fine, because some of them were good. Some of them I didn't like too much. Some of them weren't nice to me. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you look like, because I had plenty of blonde cousins on my dad's side some of them were nice, some of them were good to me. And your appearance doesn't really matter. And so they were told my first cousin was told by my great grandmother as late as the 60s, don't admit you're Indigenous, because they kill Indigenous on the weekends. And when Canada, Newfoundland joined Confederation, there was a writer, Harold Horwood, who did a 1959 article in the Plains where Beothics were people killed for fun. Because Newfoundlanders 200 years ago believed in killing the nits as well as the lice, so kill the kids too. Don't let any of them live. And they eliminated Beothic by 1830, at least officially. And so my great-grandmother knew of this, and they never continued the practice after the Beothic was gone. I checked with professors at MUN, but it was part of her cultural consciousness. And so what you see is the genocide steps in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, and the first steps were actual purposeful elimination and death and killing. Those tactics have softened. It's like scalping bounties became reserves, became residential schools, became forced foster care. These are all tactics. They're all from residential schools. They've all been designed to force Indigenous people into white society, teach them the habits and modes of thought of white men. And it's continuous. And it's only so when we had to write up stuff to prove that we're Indigenous, I never thought of things that I did as being particularly Indigenous.
Right.
I found out afterwards that we're looking for them. So my dad had a boat. We would go out in the Gulf of St. Lawrence and catch enough fish to feed us for most of the year. So we always had fish. On the weekends, we went and picked berries. And my dad he was from an island in the middle of the Bay of Islands in Newfoundland. And we would go out there and plant potatoes, then go harvest potatoes. And so we always had buckets of berries and buckets of just whatever we could get, and save apples and have them in the freezer. And so this this foraging of food and keeping food. I only found out that later that a lot of my non-Indigenous friends outside my family didn't do it as much.
Yeah.
And it was like we never hunted for fun. If we were hunting or if we were catching fish,
Right.
we were going there to get, when fishing was good in Newfoundland, we'd get a couple of 100 pounds of fillets in a couple of hours. And so the freezer would be full. My dad never had the taste for moose, but that's what people do. They fend for themselves as much as possible.
Right.
The genocide has been ongoing, and how it affected people in Palapu who were taught to hide the fact that they're Indigenous, to how it affected people who were the last contacted as you moved out west. It's different, and the tactics were different, but the goals remain the same.
And like you said in the documentary about the fact that the biggest problem, well, I mean, not biggest problem, one of the strongest concerns of the mascots is the basically looking at the Indigenous people as clowns, as looking at them, making fun of them on the weekends. So how can you, as an Indigenous person in any sort of priority position or any sort of position of power, actually be respected? It like are you going to be respected as an Indigenous person if that Caucasian person there is going to dress in the war paint and the headdress, or even just wear a ball cap with the insignia of the Chicago Blackhawks Indian head?
You got to draw a line. My kids wouldn't play for Indigenous mascotted teams. So that meant my daughters played with boys the last 5 years of their minor hockey. I was at UWindsor last fall. I was doing a PhD in sociology/social justice, because when I talked about scientific racism and some of the things that I talked about, the culture of Indigenous racism related to sociology practice. But some of the early writers in sociology, these guys, Durkheim and his son-in-law, who wrote Mouse, which Sheldon uses for his hatred of gifts on The Big Bang Theory, I figured I'd read the Mouse book, The Gift.
Yeah.
And basically, through their culture, their career of 30 years from 1890s to 1925, when The Gift was written, they classified Indigenous societies as primitive and savage. And The Gift says, well, we take a look at these total primitive cultures in the gifting economy, or the economy in BC. What do you call it? They banned them. Oh, I'm forgetting a word. So anyways, if you take a look at these economies are the exact same thing that they do in Papua New Guinea, and the same thing they do in Micronesia. And all these guys are the same. And we take a look at these savages, we can learn something about white men. And I'm like, that's not appropriate. You can't be saying that anymore. You can't be calling an entire people primitive and savage because they're different.
Right.
He said, yeah, but it's okay because they wrote it in French. And then I said, I don't think so, dude. It's like the French community in Newfoundland is named after my great-great-great-grandfather. Micmac are partnered with the French, and so most of the Micmac in Newfoundland and in the Maritimes have French surnames. And I said, I don't think so, dude. And he said, yeah, but they can't be racist because they're Jewish. And I'm like, sorry, Bill Wirtz owns the Chicago Blackhawks. Daniel Snyder owned the Washington team. They're Jewish people. They're humans. They're capable of having all these negative characteristics like anyone else. Anyone can be both racist and both respectful. And what there is in our society, there's an ingrown belief of superiority over certain cultures.
Right.
And it's like, so BMO in their American group in Chicago, BMO Harris Bank, they sell a BMO Blackhawks MasterCard. And BMO does all these initiatives, and you'll see them all over LinkedIn and on the computer talking about how important Indigenous employees are and how we charge. And then they sell the BMO Blackhawks MasterCard. And where do you think the 12-year-old was arrested for trying to open a bank account? Vancouver BMO. because within the culture, the corporate culture, there is a tolerance of inferior treatment of indigenous people. You wouldn't have a Charlie Chan visa, and you wouldn't have a, you know, um,
Uncle Ben.
the guy from, yeah, or an Uncle Ben American Express. That's
Yeah.
silly, but it's okay for indigenous people. And like I worked in Wall Street. I went to Notre Dame and I worked in Scotia Capital in New York. Not quite Wall Street, just off Wall Street. And one of the guys who was in my group is now head of BMO Capital Markets, and we were connected. And I said, guy's name is Dan. I said, Dan, what are you doing? It's just like, you know, this is wrong. You wouldn't do this to anyone else. He said, yeah, but we haven't made the business decision. And what's offensive to that is that corporations believe it is at their discretion whether they honor the Human Rights Code.
Right.
They believe they get to decide who's human and who's not. And that is the culture of racism. To think that, can you imagine? It's just like, can you imagine a corporation sponsoring Triumph of the Will on prime time? It's just absolutely absurd. It's just like they wouldn't do it. They would be sued so fast it wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah.
And so my strategy to take away the financial supports for indigenous mascots was to make corporations aware that there's a material financial risk if you do business with these teams. You create a hostile environment for the people whom you do business with and the people you employ. So if the Human Rights Commission of Ontario, Tribunal of Ontario, had the courage to do its job, and it was lacking, then an BMO employee who didn't get a promotion, and he was indigenous, and he was like, geez, it's like I had this great performance review, and this guy who sold less and had a lower performance review than me, finished lower than me in school, he got promoted and I didn't. Well, he could have said, well, you know what? They sell a BMO Blackhawks MasterCard.
Yeah.
Pretty sure they're racist against indigenous people. And that would have just cut the money from all of them. That's why I went to the city of Mississauga, big city, so had 5 teams. So the subsidies for one team, so an hour a week's about $70 an hour. They had 75 teams. It adds up.
Yeah.
So over the course of the season, it was a couple $100,000. So you take away that money, they're changing the name. And what I wanted was that the city would help them change their name. $30,000, $50,000 would have been smarter. Just give them the money. And I said, until you force them to change the name, any monies that you give them, you have to give back to indigenous groups whom you're harming.
Right.
Of course, it was characterized as I was trying to get $700,000 a year. It's just like, that's not really the truth. It was like, look, you're doing harm, undo the harm. Because obviously it's not a winning argument if I say, well, I want this money, because it's like, you know, and they still thought I was just in it for me.
Right.
And it's just like, but I'm trying to win. I'm still trying to win. I got the Mississauga Blackhawks. I got a bunch of most of the teams in Ontario. Still have to watch those idiots on hockey night talk about the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah.
I was in contact with members of Hockey Night in Canada and with the VP and VP equity at Hockey Night at the NHL. That's one Ken B. Davis. And I said, you know, you can't have the Blackhawks, and they feature the Blackhawks in the Black Lives Matter moment. And Ethan Beer standing right there, and he got nailed by racist fans. And they would never say anything about Daryl Sutter Chiefs were in the thing. And I know people in Calgary who have complained about that, the Sutter Chiefs, and it's a racist team because the Sutters are Swiss. They're not indigenous. They're just appropriating indigenous culture and using it any way they like, which is like, it's not yours, it's mine, we took it. And it's all about power and control.
100%. That was the whole thing. Like when you brought up the Ethan Bear aspect, like you said, that he was put in this horrible situation. Number one, he wasn't connected to the Hockey Diversity Alliance, as there's from what we're looking at, there's no indigenous representation at this point. And so Darnell Nurse and Malcolm Subban, both Black hockey players, are connected to the Diversity Alliance. And Malcolm Subban is wearing the Blackhawks jersey, which with the appropriation and the discrimination of Indigenous culture on, and Ethan Bear is on the side, like you see it in your documentary. And I mean, it's a photo that people have seen if you watched it, because it was right in the middle of the George Floyd murder and the Black Lives Matter movement in Minnesota, so it really got airplay. And then, like you said, Ethan Bear had a rough playoff for a young player in Edmonton, and the fans, well, I say fans, the racist pieces of garbage contacted him, and you're still, yeah, you're still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd second now. I just switched to a screen and it went black, and so that's my light.
Okay, there you go. I was hoping we had the thunderstorms earlier, and I was hoping we weren't going to get shut off.
No, I'm using my TV. I use a TV as a monitor, and that's my light.
No worries at all. So the point being was Ethan. I mean, number one, he was abused by not fans, like people that supposedly are fans, but fans of a hockey club aren't going to show true fanatics of a team are going to be supportive of the team regardless of we'll never look at a cultural aspect for judgment, and these people did. And unfortunately, him and his fiance were targeted on Instagram and on social media. Ended up that the Oilers traded him to Carolina, and he went and did great things for the community in Carolina. He does great things for minor hockey in Saskatchewan, where he's from. There was a huge outcry for people that were supportive of him. I actually worked with a Cree group out of Masquachese, which is just north of us, to create this mug that was that we stand with Bear in the Cree language. Even though I'm a white guy, we were going to raise money for the Bear Clan Patrol. Regardless, we created the mug, showed support. The people that actually supported him showed the support, but the one thing that really frustrated the hell out of me is the Oiler Entertainment Group and Daryl Cates, and they made a lot of money off those Ethan Bear Cree language jerseys. And the only places you could get them was actually from officially licensed suppliers of the Oilers Entertainment Group. Mm-hmm. So he's great for you to make a bunch of money off him, but he's not good enough for you to stand by him when he's being abused. So just like you said, that people just see everything as a business. And but one of the other points you had is that business side. Like when the Washington Football Club went from their former name to the football club, and then to the Guardians, or not to the Guardians, to the to their current name, the Commanders. Their merchandise and their ticket sales went up.
Oh yeah, there's money. There's always money in equity. There's no money in hate. Like the NHL is at a step with society, and we had inflation of what, total of 21-22% over the past 3 years, and the salary cap has gone up $1 million. This league is shrinking. It's a sport where poor people can't afford to play.
100%.
That's not open to minorities, and is at a step. And they were talking about Bill Peters, and they fired Bill Peters and brought in Daryl Sutter shortly afterwards, and he had the Sutter Chiefs and never said a damn word.
Yeah.
And Mark Crawford said something to Harold Druken, who was saying stuff go up onto your boats. Now, I actually played a softball game against Druken when he was 14 and I was 21 or 22 or 23. And he hit a ball across the street when he was 14, the year before he went to the thing. So he was a good athlete. I think he was drafted 100%. Second round. And he said on the thing, it's like, I wouldn't let him coach my dog.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another story. Jason King, who was just hired as a coach with the Minnesota Wild. Yeah. He's from my hometown. I used to play hockey with him sometimes when I went home for summer. in the summer. I
He played
used
under
to teach
Crawford
English
as
in
well.
Japan.
Yeah.
He scored 11 goals in November with the Sedines, his first year up.
Yep.
Crawford was the coach.
Yep.
Never heard from him again.
Nope.
And after looking at the Drukin experience, you wonder. You wonder, was he getting the stuff? But the NHL is silly. I mean, when Nazem Kadri was getting hammered by those idiots in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And look, Nazem Kadri never controlled his temper when he was with the Leafs. And he was a risk because he would take penalties, just lose control sometimes, take bad penalties. But it wasn't because of who his family was.
No.
It was because
nothing to
it
do
was
with his
conditioned
culture.
for him. But they went and they spoke to the coach of the St. Louis Blues, and they said, "What do you think about racism in hockey?" Except the coach of the St. Louis
Blues is Craig
Blues,
Berube.
yeah, is a First Nations guy, and his professional nickname, and they have several Twitter accounts to it, is Chief.
Yeah.
I dare you to go up to the biggest Indigenous guy you can see in Calgary or Edmonton and start calling him Chief and see how that works out for you.
Yeah.
Because Chief is a slur and is meant to have the same cultural context as calling someone boy.
Right.
And Berube, who's in the NHL, his nickname, his Chief, club-sponsored Twitter accounts have the Chief, or they have it. So they're affiliated with the organization. He has to work in the NHL with a slur as a nickname. That's sort of like, so can you imagine? I mean, we're 35 years beyond Al Campanis, who's the GM of the Dodgers, who said on Nightline with Ted Koppel. I actually saw that live. It's like, yeah, African Americans, they just can't be managers or pitchers because they don't have the mental capacity. They're good at other things. And he was gone. And the black players that you see in Major League Baseball now are from the Dominican and from the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Black Americans have stopped playing baseball from that point.
Yeah, they went to
And
basketball.
but yet, they went to football too.
Oh, that as well.
And I think if the Major League Baseball got rid of the Braves and said that we don't tolerate racism, I mean, people aren't going to be playing baseball that much, football that much longer. I mean, you don't want to get CTE for a 3-year career when you could play professional sports for 20 years in baseball and get out when you're done and be able to walk and run and play with your kids and, play a game of Scrabble and spell that right. It's just a better thing, right? But they won't do it. It's like the regional thing on the Braves, like Rob Manfred said, well, it's a regional thing. So it's just like, I don't know. It's just like, what's the latitude? Can I use the N-word? If I'm south of the 40th parallel, can I use the N-word? Is there a geographic distinction of when that word comes in? Can I quote Lenny Bruce? Depending upon my longitude, do I have to be, if I'm over here, can I use it there? And it's just like, it's absolutely silly, but that's a symbol of the racism, and it's just crazy. And the worst one that I've seen, and this, like, there's a number of things that kind of made me sick. When I saw that after we signed a deal with Mississauga, and it's like I'm trying to tell people and explain to me how bad is what's going on. It's like there were 4 groups that were appointed by the Human Rights Commission. They beat me up enough. I didn't want to be involved anymore. I just wanted to sign something and get out of there. There are 4 groups, and within 4 months, the NHL had the first Cree game in a Rogers hometown hockey on Six Nations in Brantford. And it was on APTN, and it was the first Cree game was with the Blackhawks. And I didn't see it was with APTN until the year afterwards, because if I just saw it I just saw hometown hockey, and it's just like my heart sunk. It's just like, oh my God, why you sell it out? Yeah. But then more recently, I had to pull it down because I find it personally disturbing. The head of the assistant deputy minister for Marcy-Ian, and she's the member of Status of Women, or the federal minister for Status of Women. 2 years ago, they were doing a big thing about Bridget Laquette, an Indigenous hockey hero, the first Indigenous hockey player to win an Olympic medal. Made a big deal about her working for the Blackhawks as a step forward of equity. And it's just like, And they did it in 3 news cycles. They did it in the summer of 2021, they did it in the winter around Christmas, and then they did it again in the summer of 22. And then on LinkedIn, I'm not connected to this woman, and I'm trying to remember the name, but the ADM from RCA and an Indigenous woman posted that it was a step forward for Laquette to work for the Blackhawks. For an Indigenous woman to work with a team that trivializes and mocks Indigenous people, it's a step forward in some respect. And it's just like, you gotta be kidding me. Now that woman is the ADM for Indigenous Services. And it's just like, that's not leadership. It's like, you're supposed to clear the path for people who need your assistance when you're a leader. You're not supposed to tell them to accept things that you cannot change. It's like, listen, it's good that you can work for the Blackhawks. Like, I went to Notre Dame. A lot of my friends would use Blackhawks logos in their LinkedIn and their Facebook pictures. And I say, hey, you know what? That's pretty offensive. Because I understand now the harm it causes. And they would go, woo, 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 woo. So after a while, it's just like, it just goes on. Like, Notre Dame still runs mission schools in their Catholic Indian academic network. So while the Pope was here apologizing last year, and everyone's saying it, I'm saying this, like, look, Notre Dame, the University of Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, they're still running these schools, and including the ones, and they were the blueprint for Langevin and Ryerson to form Canada's, and they're running them, including one in St. Joe's, Indiana, that CNN did a major story on, about they were doing poverty porn, taking these fake kids and making up fake scenarios and raising a couple of $100 million from. And even worse is that school is run by the priests of the Sacred Heart, and they have parishes in Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa, and they raise money for their missions, which are the residential schools that Notre Dame still runs. You can look it up on Google Notre Dame Catholic Education or Indian Education Network or Indian Mission Schools, and it'll take you to the website. And it's just like, you see this, and it's like, do you think I want to go back to Notre Dame? Do you think that they value me as an alumni? I mean, come on. I mean, their high school, their nickname was the Indians until last month. And they had to change the name and not hold meetings because, well, the protests would have been pretty big. It's just like, you look at it and it's just like, it's absurd. And it's just like, you're living in this alternate reality where you kind of see what's going on. And it's just like, what the hell are we doing? I mean, what's wrong with you? I mean, why can't you just see that what you're doing is wrong? It's like, you wouldn't treat your dog like this.
Right.
To quote Harold Drugan.
And this is the whole aspect, like you say in the documentary, of the like from residential schools to the like Mr. Jesko said earlier on the show here, it's ongoing genocide. Like, you have the statistic there that, like, before slavery, you've got Indigenous genocide that trumps these things in North America.
Well, North America, look, so when they're trying to kill people, they're trying to make sure that they don't reproduce. Hitler was trying to kill all the Jews. The Turks were trying to kill all the Armenians. The Russians were trying to kill all the Cossacks and get all the Ukrainians out of the Ukraine. And we recognize these genocides, but Putin won't recognize the Holodomor. But it's there. And these had an effect on the long-term average growth rate of the populations. So you take a look at the genocide in Germany. There are 16 million Jews in Europe that started the Holocaust. There's now, according to the fact book from the Israeli government, 23 or 24 million people eligible to be citizen of Israel because they're part of the of their group.
The displaced group, yeah.
Yeah. And so you can do the numbers, 16, and you do it. And so the Holocaust, which killed 6 or 9 million. I'm just
Yeah,
for some reason they they killed 6
many
million
millions
Jews
of
in
people.
Europe. That slowed the Jewish population to 3.4 times slower than the rest of the world population growth over the same period. So that's the effect of the genocide. Holodomor was slightly less. There's an effect. There are fewer Armenian people in the world today that there would have if there wasn't a genocide. That's an effect because of the rampant population growth of the Congo, the Belgian Congo, where they killed 20 million people over 25 or 30 years. And that, because there has been faster growth in Africa over the time period than the rest of the world, but if you compare it to the world, it turns out to be a smaller effect. But, I wouldn't say killing 20 million people is a small effect by any means. So this is a numeric effect. This is a financial approach. I did an MBA in finance, way I look at things. But if you look at the North American genocide, and I use 12 million people at contact north of the Rio Grande, which is a small number. Some people say as high as 40 or 60. So if I use 12 million, and now there's 6 million people today since contact, since either Columbus or maybe a Portuguese guy landed first in Newfoundland coming over from the Azores. It's a little evidence, not the greatest, strongest, but it's plausible. Population of indigenous people in North America is down by half. So we're more effective at killing people than Hitler and Stalin. Why are we proud of this? Why are we celebrating this with the tomahawk chops and the Braves and the Chiefs and all these events that celebrate genocide? It's just like, come on, be better.
Exactly. And the one of the things that you're seeing, and you mentioned the documentary, and you're seeing it today, is the own indigenous people making, like, basically giving a pass or giving the hall pass to white supremacy to continue with this appropriation of culture, or like this discrimination of basically allowing people to desecrate the culture by, like you said, the tomahawk chop. We really saw it with the Cleveland team going to Guardians. That took away some of the vitriol in, like, outside of the Braves, but we really saw it ramp up with the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, and just watching, like, my wife, who doesn't watch a lot of football, but since marrying me has watched even more. I grew up in Saskatchewan. There's just no way around not watching football. But we're watching the game and watching the playoff game between the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs, the one that went to like 5 overtimes or 6 overtimes, and it was the most exciting game in NFL history or whatever. And all you hear is the whoa, like and you know what it is. Anyone who is our age or like slightly younger would have been around for the 1991-92 Blue Jays World Series. The 91, the 1991 one was the one where they played the Braves first, and like that's like etched in my memory of having to put up with. It was a taunt against the team, but just allowing and having like freaking Ted Turner and Jane Fonda there celebrating it, like, and that was just so disappointing for like me. Jane Fonda being an activist and being social justice person, and sitting there and they're doing the tomahawk chop because that's what the Braves did at the time. And
it's Jimmy Carter was there too.
Well, exactly. Habitat for Humanity's own Jimmy Carter. So you've got these people, and this is where when you say that my local barber actually has one of the best lines. He goes, it doesn't matter if you're this or you're that, just don't be an asshole. So it's like you can be the best Indigenous person or the worst Indigenous person. That's your choice. Just don't be take care of people. You can be a bad white person. It's got nothing to do with cultural unless you're sitting there and celebrating the internalized white supremacy. Then you're embracing the colonization, and that's the shit that needs to go, because continuing with this horrible freaking like celebration of genocide through said the treatment of indigenous people, the treatment of people of the global majority, the people of the 2S LGBT community, like it's all this internalized bullshit that people in power are doing, and then the ones that really frustrate the hell out of me are the enablers. And that's when you get into those whole thing that they'll just turn a blind eye and go, well, maybe it's not that bad or whatever. Like someone saying, okay, well, if they're just celebrating the team's culture, but in your documentary, you compared the red face of the paint of the Blackhawks with blackface. And we all know, like, we had it in the promo there of Prime Minister Trudeau got into a lot of hot water with his rendition of being Aladdin and going full blackface while he was a drama teacher. Why wouldn't the same person, why wouldn't you have that same sort of feeling as wearing red face and a Blackhawks jersey and going full bore? Like you've made that comparison, and that's what people need to understand, that it's not anything different between the appropriation of the Black culture or the indigenous culture.
Well, so I did an overlay of the model of the Buffalo nickel, which is a famous sculpture, and it was the model was Chief Irontail. And I took his face and overlaid it with the image of the Iron Tail. You can see how they have drawn a grotesque version and characterization of his face, made his forehead slope, made his nose protrude. And this is scientific racism, and this is one of the first expanders of the harms of racism that I used. I showed it to a professor, Nina Jablonski at Penn State, who led a project of being what is race today or something. She works with Henry Louis Gates on some of his Finding Your Roots camps. She's a well-known anthropologist in the U.S. And I said, I'm seeing scientific racism here. And she said, yeah, I never saw that before. Thank you very much. And the reason why I made that point is that scientific racism, they used to draw Irish people. And they talk about paddywhagging and Irish twins. All these are racist terms, right? Yep. And they did it with Italians. When Johnny Cash, he married an Italian girl. And when they saw his wife on the news in the 1960s, they said that, he was mixing racists. And so it's just like Italians weren't right. So anyone who wasn't quite exactly the way you expect an English person to work, they were inferior. And so this garbage has been used to confirm the treatment and the segregation of schools in the U.S. And it was proven to be BS after World War II with the United Nations, UNESCO's paper, The Race Question. And these ideas are harmful. And you take a look at the Blackhawks logo, and the Redskins logo, which are mirror images, and they're basically the Buffalo nickel. It's just like these images are harmful. They continue white supremacy in the mainstream. And so when you see the kids attacking that elder at the Washington Monument a couple of years ago, wearing the MAGA hats, doing the tomahawk chop at the guy, yeah. And it's just like this belief that you can stand on people and permission to stand on people who are different than you reflects in the society. So what do? You take it away from them. You say you can't do that anymore. And so Barack Obama says he's a Blackhawks fan, and he's not. He was like when the George Floyd one, when he came out and he said all these negative things. But then you say, well, you're a Blackhawks fan, dude. Yeah. You can see that it's inappropriate for you, but it's also inappropriate for us too. And if it's like I grew up in Newfoundland. I had a cousin who was Black. Other than that, I didn't know very many Black people. Like Trey, The guy on this hour has 22 minutes. I'm connected to him on Facebook. He was a couple of years younger than me. I'd see him around. Honestly, Newfoundlanders say bye at the end of the sentence. That's our affirmation. Like people say a, and I was always paranoid. I didn't want to call him boy. I would just like, and when I actually moved down the States and knowing that people didn't understand where Newfoundland was from, because a girl who went to Columbia, a smart girl at Notre Dame, didn't know where Newfoundland was. It was like, how am I going to explain to people who didn't have the privilege of expansive education where Newfoundland is?
No.
And if I say yes, bye, no, bye, I dropped it and I started saying chief, because chief doesn't have a meaning in Newfoundland. It's just like it's not used as a separator. It's not used as a harmful word.
Yeah.
I do business up in Thunder Bay, and they say, "Oh, dude, don't say that. Do not use that word." And so I had to take that out of my vocabulary, because I understand sometimes I make a mistake, and sometimes people make mistakes. You got to realize people will always make mistakes. I actually believe Danielle Smith's when she said she didn't look at the T-shirt. She probably did 50 pictures that day. She didn't go and say, "Hey, this is a T-shirt that I want to take a picture with."
I don't know.
I know, but I know, but I mean, this is bad business. You got to realize she wants to win, and those kooks who are on the side that are like that, it's not good business for her to do that, because she will lose corporate sponsorship for it. I believe her when she said she didn't do it. Now, do I think she might support what he's saying? Maybe, but she wouldn't be stupid enough to do it in a picture that people would see. That's not. It's just like you got to say, well,
we'll agree to disagree on that one, but that's just knowing her history and all the stuff that she's done.
I know. I know when you're close to it, it's hard to see. But you got to, like, I've been around, I worked on Wall Street. I've been around guys who are slick. They wouldn't make that mistake. They make mistakes, but they don't make that mistake. And it's just
not necessarily her mistake is more along the lines of her whole cabinet is incompetent. And so her support staff, or the staff that's supposed to fight, like, you've got a whole staff, because she's got one of the biggest like supportive staffs, that when they're like, basically she looks like the president when she's wandering around. Like, she's got security and she's got all these staffers around. Not one of them could figure I think that was the biggest thing, is not one of them could figure out that this person should not be photographed with the current leader of Alberta wearing this shirt.
And her staff might have let it go, and I believe that might have been the case. But you got to realize the arguments that they're saying about how to run the economy, let's cut taxes, nobody who has a financial clue actually believes that anymore.
Yeah.
And it's harder and harder to get credible people to say, let's do the same trick that's worked for the past 40 years when it stopped working effectively 20 years ago. Because sometimes taxes are too high. Yeah, but it's like sometimes the taxes are too high and you have to cut them and stimulate the economy. And right now we're not investing in infrastructure and a lot of things that we should be investing in education and healthcare. And we need to redistribute the income to make sure the economy works effectively, because it's good for business if everyone is productive and active in society. It's bad for business to have only a few people who can buy products. So there's a pendulum balance. And the people who are still peddling this monetarism, let's cut the taxes stuff, it's just like there's no evidence to support you anymore. And you're not going to, these are just people who are going to hammer away at lies that are just no longer true. And let's not stand for residential schools, because by denying the truth of what Canada is, well, you guys are great. You guys are great. We're not going to say anything that's nasty about you, because you guys are great. You can't handle the truth. And I think they underestimate the intelligence of Canadians. I think, look, most people are all right. Even the people who might support that, when you get them down to the personal lives, they're not mean to people. They want to be and deal with people, and they want to have a nice environment for everyone to do. They want to have a place. They don't want to see hungry people on the street, and they don't want to take advantage of people who are weaker than them. But you got to realize that you can't think that they want this. Nobody really wants a hostile society. there are problems and we got to face them. And it's like, I think people, you got to give Canadians credit. And it's like, look, we did these things in the past. And we can't be good. We can't be good Canadians. If there were good Germans who went along with some of the things that was done in Germany during the Holocaust because they kind of believed and were okay with them, then we got to start questioning ourselves. When we see someone throwing out a grandfather trying to buy something at Canadian Tire, it's just like, dude, what are you doing? He's just buying something. Leave him alone.
Yeah.
Or if you see someone, if you see your coworker calling social services when you see an Indigenous woman come in, somebody's got to have the balls to say, what are you doing?
Yeah.
She's a lawyer. She's fine. She doesn't need help. You don't need to call social services on her. You can't see that, right? And when you see someone's lost in the dump, you just say, you know what? We'll go take a look. We've done it for this people. We can afford it. This is how much we can afford. We can't stir it up because there are methane gas plants in dumps now because they harvest the methane and they produce power from it. And there is methane. So it's not a simple procedure, but you can use, like, you can say, look, what can we do? Can we do some scanning technology? Because when you make one choice for one person, it's like the Human Rights Commission allowed 4 groups to decide what I was allowed to be offended by. So they gave up their authority to decide where the law comes in.
Right.
And it's just like, would you do that for anyone else? Would you really go to Snoop Dogg and get permission to call Oprah Winfrey the N-word? I mean, and you were talking about the guys in Canada. So when the Chiefs were coming and they were supposed to come to Buffalo 2 years ago, there's a USA Today story.
Yeah.
And 6 Nations in Buffalo were saying, we wouldn't let them here. We wouldn't do anything like that. And I saw that and I was kind of ticked. So I called the professor at University of Buffalo, who was in the article. She's done some, can't remember her name now, but I gave her a call or sent her an email. And I said, like, do you see what 6 Nations across the border are doing? They hosted the Blackhawks at APTN. She said, yeah, we wouldn't have the Chiefs here because it's not the same in Canada as it is in the US. It's like when the Pittsburgh Pirates approved the Indianapolis Indians, they tried to go out and get everyone. They got a band that doesn't have status, that lost their status in 1890s. They're the guys that gave their approval for the Indianapolis Indians, even though I believe it's a Pittsburgh Pirates team. And it's not, I think 90% of the bands in the States are against this stuff now.
Yeah.
There is not the same solidarity among Canadian First Nations as you saw AFN last week. We're pretty divided. And the government uses that division to keep us down. That's part of the oppression. 100%. It's just like the First Nations, AFN doesn't represent us. It's just another effing mess. Well, it's just like it's just like there's 630 bands. To get enough, I think you need 67% of the vote in order to be elected chief. You only need 28% of the population. Yeah. And a lot of those smaller bands have proxies now, so they vote for them. And I don't know, of the 628 bands, right? Is there only 500 people voting? Is there 400 people voting? Can one person hold 5 or 10 votes? I don't know. I'd like to know. But what role is proxies? Because if you have these proxies and you only need 20% of the population to get 2/3 of the vote, then you have a system that's completely and easily manipulated. So you only have to pay off a few people to control it and to get people to do it. So this is like the Vichy government run by the puppet government in France. I mean, AFN is not a true representation. It has an electoral college. There are problems. And Canada enforces that division to divide us and to keep control. Because what they're trying to do is to eventually make sure that they own everything and there's no challenges to their sovereignty. And you got to stop looking at Indigenous people as a burden, because they're not. They are part of the country. They are contributors to the wealth of the nation. They should be looking at as equity partners because they're good. Now Terrell has blocked me because he was telling us who not to to follow on
Okay,
Twitter.
well,
And I said,
Terrell he hasn't blocked me yet. We've
but
had a couple of
he posts
go
good
at.
stuff. Yeah, but
so one of those things it just came across my feed. I wanted to share it tonight.
Yeah.
Was Regina Crowchild, who is from Alberta, and here's her getting a chance to speak the truth at the AFN AGM.
Canada hired those institutions to set up residential school for us to get rid of the Indian in us, to not know who we are and what our history is, what our language is, what our ceremony is, what our governance structures are. All because they assume title to our territory. Then they give us a few dollars to shut us up.
There's my chief, my cousin,
And now
right there
they
in the
want
middle.
reconciliation.
Nice.
Well, yes, there's a lot of good things on those reconciliation. However, they also include delegated authority by allowing Canada to legislate over us on health, on education,
Next time I'll download
on
it.
our language even. When you
I
give
got to tell you
Canada
something
that
about the
right
health.
to legislate over you're saying there's.
Hold on, yep. Go ahead.
I think it's good. I was just technical. Some neat things. When we did the survey of the most treasured or the greatest Canadians a couple of years ago, Don Cherry was in it.
Yeah. It was
And you see,
all that stuff. Yeah.
I'm not a fan, and Tommy Douglas got it because healthcare is things that we're most proud of. But federal government has offloaded the Indigenous health plan to an Express Scripts, which are HMO from the U.S. I was told about it, and I said, dude, I'm not sitting in the office and denying someone health care to improve my bottom line.
Yeah.
I said, you would never allow a HMO to run Canadian healthcare. You'd never get off with it. And so immediately after Express Scripts took over, the guy who normally had someone travel with him when he would fly down to get his heart treatments once a month was alone on the bus, and he had a heart attack and died. And they figure if he was provided the care that he had before the HMO took over, he would have made it. And so there are immediate effects. And so Canada there's the Human Rights Commission of Ontario says that Canada is a country founded on colonization and immigration, sets the order of things. Colonists are first, and immigrants are next. There's no place for Indigenous people. And that's how Canada sees itself. And that's in the guidelines and policies of the Human Rights Commission of Ontario. And that's the organization designed to protect equal rights for all people, has a criterion of who's more important. That's the Canadian experience for Indigenous people. And that's why you'll see, if you watch the documentary, and it's an earlier version that's on Tubi, I have the tomahawk drum beat consistently. I think it's about 45% of the edit that's on Stash TV. It's 100% because that symbolizes racism. Because if you're Indigenous in Canada, you cannot exist without being aware that you're not Canadian. Racism is constant. It's always in your ear. They're always telling you that you're inferior. And getting rid of mascots is the first step in saying that, listen, buddy, so when your kid goes to school and the kid next to him wears the Blackhawks jersey, you can't be like my kid and say that, well, Stacey LaForme says that's okay, or Six Nations says that's okay, and so she had to eat it. But you got to go is like, that's offensive to me. That demeans my culture, just like every other kid in the school. And they have to remove it. And it's a difficult thing navigating what it is, but when somebody's should have the right to experience a Canadian government institution or use our facilities or participate in the economy without judgment, without feeling like they're less. And you get rid of mascots, you stop having the Chiefs and the Braves on TV, which I don't watch. It's just like, It's like I had Rogers called me for one of their Indigenous outreach jobs, and I was halfway through the interview. I said, "Dude, you're going to show a Blackhawks game, and I'm going to have to take you to Human Rights Court. Human Rights Court's going to side with you,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to enjoy working with you because there's no way. It's like there's no way I could be part of your company and watch as everyone stand by. There's no way I could work with CBC and all these guys talk this BS and talk about racism all the time and then keep their friggin' mouth shut when Hockey Night in Canada shows the Blackhawks. They're courageous and they fight hard for their own rights. And they're just like the cops in Minneapolis who stood behind the cop with his knee on the cop and George Floyd's neck. They know what's going on. They know what's wrong. They know what their duties are, but they don't think it applies. And so when you look at people now and you see the choices that they made, because what they're doing, they're saying, you're not important. I understand that this is how I treat people and this defines me, but it doesn't apply to you. And the first time that Roots was done in the 1980s, in the late 70s or early 80s, 70s. And the way they set that up is they would have a pious white person come on as a friend to the slaves, and they'd always have them say, this is how you treat people. And then in the series, they'd always put that person in the situation where his words were challenged. And in every instance, he never did it. And when you have CBC and you have APTN, for God's sakes, not stand up for the rights and the dignity of Indigenous people and cultures, it's just like, come on, you know better. Have some friggin' courage. Just
we need more courage. Need more people like you.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. I think it's better to keep your head down, your mouth shut in Canada. And it's like the people think that me standing up, there's something wrong with me, that I'm just someone looking for attention. I just wouldn't be happy letting someone walk all over me like other people are.
Well, and
so I made a stand, and I don't know if I would do it. I just don't think Canada's the right place for me.
Well, the very, very similar situation that I'm in there, that you took the stand, you put a giant target on your back. Employment, you said it that in the documentary that it infected your wife, infected your daughter's schooling. Like, this wasn't just like, this is a whole thing that people need to understand with whistleblowers and people that are actually speaking truth to power. It's not for fucking the fame. It's sure as shit not for fortune, because the struggle is real when it comes to the fact that when you don't want to be within that system, where you're trying to do things outside the system. And one of those things is your company is the Beyond Green Productions. Tell us a little bit about that, about your organization. No, it's one of the reasons why you started it was based on the target and basically blacklisted. But what do you do, and how can you help people?
Well, the first thing I did an energy efficiency video series, and it was the featured resource for this organization called the Green Schools Alliance from 16 to 20. They took it off their website last year.
Okay.
And at the time, the official sponsors were me and the Department of Energy and the Department of Forestry in the U.S. And so part of that organization was every major league city school board in the U.S. So New York, Chicago. And I developed a way for them to watch the videos and have questions that they can use in any classroom, independent of where you were. And so I brought in energy efficiency knowledge because I was on the working committees for groups for energy efficiency programs in Ontario 10 or 12 years ago or 13 years ago. And I understood how energy efficiency worked. I understood how to teach energy efficiency because I used to be a teacher. And I put together a video series that of a kid in a reserve in a small town or in small town Alberta where their teachers aren't knowledgeable of energy efficiency literacy or how to justify the business case. They can watch the video series and independently at their own time and learn to their ability. And so there's 35 video series, and that's there, and I just updated it. Maybe there was some funny stuff related to me. Like I never got any funding from any source in Canada, any support, even when it was featured on International School Board website, which had about a $12 billion spend of energy and energy efficiency capital projects. And it's just like, what do you mean? It's like you don't want to get involved. You don't want to put your name out to this broad market.
Yeah.
And it was surprising. And then I figured out how I got hammered when I complained about a Newfie joke, and I kind of stopped working on that a while. And while I was trying to keep myself busy, I did the documentary. It won Best Native American Film in the 2022 Latino and Native American Film Festival that was hosted by a professor who used to teach at Yale, and now he teaches at, I believe, South Connecticut University. Tied with something from PBS Independent Lens. So until then, I thought my little documentary was not that great, but it tied with something from Independent Lens, which got a 7.4 on IMDb. So I was pretty pleased with that, and I've since updated the soundtrack to make it more watchable. But last year at Imaginative, they didn't show my documentary on mascots. Instead, they showed a non-Indigenous production about the American experience mascots as the feature film, and mine wasn't allowed in, even on the digital version. And after a while, it's because I'm making fun of APTN and CBC Indigenous and a lot of people. It's just like, okay. But the thing is, what I'm talking about is I'm trying to demonstrate that mascots are part of a larger culture of racism. And if you watch the documentary, I'm hoping people will just start to question what they're doing. And if I walk away from this business and go work for someone else soon, which probably will happen, it's there. It's a record. I don't think anyone should use the Human Rights Commissions. They're there for rich people, and they're there to pontificate and make it sound like they're doing it. I think I was a bad parent for getting involved. But I was in a situation where I tried to keep my job, and I didn't know what else to do because I knew I was going to get fired if I didn't do it. And I was just trying to keep my job, and it is what it is. But through the mascot process, where I used my experience and my personal story, and I figured I'd be doing some good, even though a lot of people thought I wasn't. A lot of Indigenous people thought I wasn't. And they thought I was just looking for it. I was given the gift of knowing that I wasn't imagining something. Right. I was messed over. And it's just that the Human Rights Commission won't even stand up for its own house. It's just like, that says a lot about it. If you won't protect your own house, you're not much. It's just like, they're the guys, they're the type of people you go to a bar, you get into a fight, somebody starts a fight with you that you don't cause, they're the guys who are gone.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who are like that, but they're not the guys who, when the going gets rough, they get going. And very disappointing. And I think we just have to make a decision. Do we do the right thing or we don't? And Canada has disappointed me because we're talking, I failed. I strategically went after organizations. I went after the cities. I went after school boards. I went after the sponsors. And then I went after the government. 0 for 4, 2 settlements that were ignored. And then because I wouldn't sign an NDA, which I've talked into something to the guys who are running to block NDAs in Canada, I think you can't buy my silence. Well, I can't say this for sure legally, but when I refused to sign the NDA, I got into an argument with the Human Rights Legal Support Center, and they walked away from me on my personal case. But it's just like I'm fearful of NDAs. I'm still very careful about what I say, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I only say stuff that I'm allowed to say that I know that's in a public record.
That's why
Because
we doing the show, is the fact that we're talking truth, but we're talking truth that's not going to get you in any more hot water than you were in the past.
yeah, well, it's just like, if there's anyone to come back on, they'll come back on me.
Yeah.
It's like the Human Rights Commission will go out and talk to the poor people at Timmins, and they were having some issues. I think in 2020 about Indigenous racism, and they went up and they held sessions. They won't walk across the goddamn street to Rogers and say a goddamn word.
Right.
And it's just like, you're tough when you know you can win. Well, you stick your chin out when you know you're going to get hit, and they won't.
And that's
And
the
it's just
key.
like, it's just like these false, tough, pontificating pansies. No, that's not the right word, but it was alliterative. It's just like, I got all P's. I just thought of the
You got
wrong
all
word.
P's. It's okay.
Yeah,
We
it's just like, I'm
understand.
sorry.
It's
It was
not.
just,
It wasn't in
you're
the
just
term
punt-
that it was not the term of the past. It's a term of the fact that you've got like gutless bullies.
that wasn't an LGBT comment. That was just like, I fell in love with my alliteration there for a second. But these guys are just talking a good game, and like, toughness is not about being huge.
Yeah.
It's not like some of the toughest people I know were 5'2" and 100 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Or 5 foot. It's like, if you see, I have the tribute to the We Are Not Your Mascots, and I have Charlene Teeters in the middle.
Yeah.
Because she would go to the Illinois Stadium, and she would stand outside, and they'd pull on her pigtails, and they'd do all kinds of nasty stuff. And she stood there and complained about the mascot at the Chief Illinois at the Illinois Stadium. She stood there alone, and there's no one behind her. She's tough.
Yeah.
You tell me if you got the balls to do that, to tell everyone they're racist and stand up there alone. That's tough.
100%.
You're not tough because you pick on somebody who's smaller than you. Pierre Poilievre is not tough because he won't stand for and mention the residential schools. You know what? They're part of Canada's history. We're not perfect. We made mistakes. A man admits his mistakes, faces them, and tries to do his best that they don't make the mistake, and not a man and an adult. Because, I fall into some of my old routines, the way I speak, especially when I get angry, and with the Don. And I was thinking with the Don Cherry Coke, because he said use that word about things, so that came into my head, and
No,
I just went on.
Totally understand. One of the things,
But-
like I said, we talked about the trash piece of the transphobic, racist, ableist, sexist, homophobic. The biggest one I have the issue with is the sexist piece, because the fact is that in anger, I will come across very misogynistic, and it's not on a purposeful basis, but it's like there's the words that we've used in the past that are not politically correct or are ableist in nature that we can't use anymore. But that's the whole thing, is you and I can have these conversations and say, on a documented, where people can see that this, like, we've got a few viewers right now, but we get a lot of viewers that come in later on the recorded aspect, and I'm sure we'll have comments on YouTube, and I'll go back and say, but this is the whole thing of the fact that we're not perfect. We my imperfection is my perfectionist tendencies, but we're learning, and we're trying to be better, and that's what we can do.
Yeah, it's just you learn, you come from a culture, you're raised in it, and it's not where you start, it's where you finish.
100%.
And there was so I remember I was to graduate high school in 85, and in 87 I knew a guy who a gay gentleman assaulted him at a bar, pinched his ass or something, and he put him in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And being a bravado and not knowing much at 17, 18 years old, I was lifting weights with the cop who arrested him, was put him in. He said, "Yeah, but dude, it's just like that wasn't an appropriate response." And then if you lift weights for a long time, there's a higher percentage of gay people who at the gym than there are at other places.
100%.
You know what it comes down to? It's like the good guys at the gym put away their weights. Good guys at the gym are nice to people, and they wipe up after they're done, and they don't leave their stuff around, and they don't hog machines. And those people can be whatever they want. It's just that once you realize and you take a look at where you are, I mean, it's just like, remember when people found out about Freddie Mercury and everyone was saying this. And now you look at your iPad or you look at your iPhone and my Spotify account. If I delete because I don't approve of the person's sexuality, I got 40% of my songs gone right at the top. And then if I
100%.
knew about it, I'd have 70. And it's just like, those people, they're great musicians. I listen to them for their talent at music. And if they're good people, they're good people. It's like, the way I phrase it is that I am not an Indigenous man. I don't want to be a good Indigenous man. I want to be a good man who is Indigenous. I want people to be as best you can as a person, because where you start, whether you're Polish or Japanese or whatever you are, whether you qualify for every letter in the LGBTQ.
The two SLGBTQIA plus.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Are you a good person? Because your sexuality is just one part of what makes you a good person. Your skin color is one little part of what makes a good person. What are the things that you do? Are you a person of character? All these other things. It's like there are 50 different points about people. And if you like 47 out of 50, that's good.
Yeah.
And that one of those things that you might disagree with and you don't want to hang out with them and have a beer when they go to interact in one of those things that they do that you don't, that doesn't make them a bad person. It's just like, I know great people who like, Cher. I don't like her music. Half Breed is kind of an insulting song, but they're good in other ways. They're not
See, I'll even go worse. I don't like Shania Twain. So like that, I'm basically anti-Canadian by saying that.
I hate Brian Adams because
Brian Adams,
it was just
everyone
played
can hate
too
Brian
much.
Adams. He's a piece of shit, actually. So
yeah,
outside of his music being overplayed, he's also personally a piece of shit that has been propped up because of the CanCon. But we could get into the whole conversation.
He said some negative things about Newfoundlanders that I wasn't a big fan of.
Yeah,
but
he said negative things about a lot of people that unfortunately haven't had enough play, and they keep getting protected by the Canadian elite. Like where Jan Arden is your replacement for Anne Murray in regards of being that Canadian song person, female who represents.
Just called it people who eat seal savages, didn't she?
She did.
Yeah, and so it's just like, it's just like CanCon is. So I don't like AC/DC. I don't like Kiss because it was overplayed in my hockey room. And when I was in high school, I like English New Wave rock. Unlike most of the people, like I played hockey. I played some senior. I played on the midget team on my second year midget normally, or second year, whatever, Bantam midget. Like I was all right, but I never liked hanging around with those guys, and I hated the locker room music because it was just odd. But my greatest joy about that time, remember all those guys used to wear the studded leather jackets?
Yeah.
And they used to like Rob, the guy from Iron Maiden.
Ozzy.
Yeah, but Rob, and they used to wear those jackets, and he used to wear them in concert.
Yeah.
Except that he got it from he's a gay man, and he got it from gay culture, SFN culture, and so these guys, as their symbol of their machismo, would be wearing the things
something
of
that
a
was
man
brought from the gay culture. Yeah.
And when you think about it, you kind of laugh. It's just like, it's like when you watch I was watching a TV show, and I think one guy, it was an old movie, a recent movie, and he said, "Yeah, I just hope to get all the women that George Michael got." And that was a joke because everyone thought
George
George
Michael
Michael
didn't
was
get very
super
many
cool.
women. Yeah.
Yeah, because that wasn't the way, but Freddie Mercury, George Michael, man,
Brilliant artists. Like that's, I
they
mean,
could
Elton
sing.
John just finished his tour. We sat and I watched it on Disney Plus. I watched the Goodbye Yellowbrick Road from LA Dodger Stadium, and it
Yep,
was brilliant.
I saw Billy Joel and Elton John together in concert in Fukuoka, Japan in 1998
Wow.
or 1999. That was a concert. That was 2 hours of knowing every word to every song, or 3 hours. Great concert.
Yeah.
But it's just like, and Elton is a good man. I
Yes.
didn't like his movie, the one Rocket Man. It's just,
Yes,
it
but that
lost
was
me.
yeah. That, I mean, he had a lot of
What
input on it, but there's a lot of course, Hollywood esque to it to make it more.
I saw
And
Billy Joel moving out. Last day I was living in New York before I moved back to Canada. We went to see Moving Out because I love Billy Joel,
yeah,
and I hated the experience. It was just done in a way that made me not appreciate the music.
yeah,
And but that's okay. So when you look at people, people are so many different things. There's so many things about a person, and defining yourself according to one characteristic or whatever is just absurd. And
absolutely.
so when you got to remember that even when you're speaking to someone and you're looking at people who talk about hate and they talk about it, they're making a mistake. And those people, even those people, the idiot who wore the green shirt, uh, what was he? I can't remember, the straight activist or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. It
He
was yeah.
he thought he was being clever, and he wasn't being clever.
No,
He's probably, if he might be good at 80% of the things in his life. He
right.
thought he would be cool, and he's not cool. And it's just like, and I'll mention this point to you, and probably a good place because we're probably getting close to the end. But
Yeah, we're close to wrap up.
so when the guys at Red Deer, um, and they have the Red Deer Sutter Chiefs, and those girls, because it's a girls hockey team,
Yep.
and in 10 years they moved to Toronto, and they're talking about the fun times they had on the Sutter Chiefs and all the things they did, and they talk about this and that and all these things that were acceptable in Red Deer. And the people who have grown up in a more accepting society and realize that this is harmful,
Yeah.
they're going to look at these kids and say, "Are you a moron? Are you dense? What are you talking about? What do
Yeah.
you mean you used to walk around and do the tomahawk chop in your rooms and go at your games?" It's just like, see, the parents don't realize is that they're disadvantaged. They're giving their kids a disadvantage. They're harming their kids because they talk about all these things, but they can't go around with these ideals that are out of date. And when you teach your kid, it's like one kid on my street said that my son called him the N word. And I know my son because somebody said that he called me the N word. And so I walked up to him. I'm friends with his dad. He was the same, a year older than my youngest daughter, and he's a couple years younger than my son. My youngest daughter and his sister hung around, and his name was whatever. I'm not going to say his name. And I said,
Yeah.
listen, biggest kid in the school was a Nigerian kid. His brother was fifth overall draft pick, played with the Stampeders. And I said, Peter ever says that word? I said, you can go tell so and so and have him kick Peter's ass because that's stupid.
Yeah.
Because I don't raise my son to be stupid. Because if I teach my son this information and he goes out to the larger world, then he's going to be economically unable to
Disadvantage.
compete.
Yeah.
He's not going to be accepted in society. So if he says that shit to you, you can tell the biggest kid in the school, because the kid now is normal size. He's 6'1",
Yeah.
180, but his brother is 6'6", 270. And I said, if he gets on with that crap, that's stupid. I don't want my son to be a moron. You don't have to take it. You can tell me. I'll handle it, because I don't want my kid to be disadvantaged. But yet, my daughter just graduated with a degree in political science and feminist studies. And
Awesome.
I am just a grumpy old man who, like, I'm her Don Cherry. No matter, as much as I'm accused of being a virtue signaler, I'm an
Yep.
older guy. I've watched Spike Lee's Dorm Days.
Yep.
That was the way I behaved in the late '80s. I realized that some of the things that I said back then were inappropriate now, and
100%.
sometimes I fall into those patterns. But I'm not trying to hurt people, and if I realize I'm hurting someone, I won't be a dick. I have the potential to be a dick. I just don't have the desire to be. It's like one guy when I was younger uh, told me, he said, you're a bit of an asshole when you're drunk. And I said, at least I got the courtesy to wait. But
There you go. That is the line, and it's don't be a dick. That is the best advice that we can
it's just
give
like,
tonight.
it's
Is
just,
yeah.
it's like
Whatever.
the middle way. The Hindu thing is pretty much on. And so is do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yep.
And if you don't think it's appropriate for somebody to dance around and make fun of your culture, if you see someone and you guys do the Ukrainian dances, and then some guys take it and they twist it in such a way that is disrespectful to Ukrainian dances, then you know what? Just say, well, that guy's being a bit of a dick. And if you're doing that and you're twisting around indigenous culture to such a way that's for mockery, don't do that. But I mean, there is difficulties in this multicultural society, because I would never, and it's tested. So I'll give you an example. Free Charlie, remember the guys drew that stupid magazine?
Yeah.
Shouldn't have drawn the stupid magazine. They're just being dicks. They're being racist. Absolutely. They don't deserve to die for it, though.
Right.
And it's just like you can't threaten someone because they say something you don't like. And I disagree with those guys from Six Nations, but they're not bad people. They're people who I disagree with. They disagree with what I'm trying to do. And what I'm trying to do is, like, if you want your kid to succeed in school, they should be able to go to school and interact as an equal. That's all you want. When a kid watches TV, he shouldn't be being told tomahawk chop, brave, savage, whatever. He shouldn't feel that he's a dumb or inferior just because of who he is. No other kid has to put up with it. It's not, don't make fun of Johnny, don't make fun of Joni, and fuck the indigenous kid. That era has to be done. And when you take away the mascots, then people will start challenging. It's like, give you an idea, I put it in the movie. Kid that was hurt by that, I was in the Human Rights Court with the Department of Education, or Ministry of Education in Ontario, when Barb Kentner was dying. I had filed that the year before in 2016. And if they had done something then, maybe that kid, Braden Bushby, maybe somebody would have spoke to him. Maybe he would have thought that, it's not okay to throw a trailer hitch at someone. Maybe he would have thought that person is not someone to make fun of and to target practice. So the system, not only did it fail Kentner, but it failed him.
Yeah.
They should have done a better job educating that kid. And they failed that kid, and he's in jail because someone didn't say, listen to him. Don't. He's a person. Don't do that. And so the kids who practice that, who are doing the bullying, and so this is the white kids. The white kids are being underserved, and they're being abused, and they're being just led astray by people who won't stand up and say, this is what we believe as Canadians. This is how we treat people. If somebody comes here, everyone has the opportunity to do as well as they can, and they will be judged by their ability. And if they comb their hair with steel wool, and if they brush their teeth with a tree branch, and if they pray 18 times a day, it doesn't matter. Can they do the job? And if they don't bring their personal life into work, and they're not telling other people to live, it's like, live your life. When we get together, your choices should not interfere with mine. And you are allowed to make any choices that you want. And I'm going to judge you by how you treat me, and not by traditional notions of this is stupid and this is wrong. Is the person a good person? Not a person to be a good person. Most people will be all right.
There you go. So people want to get a hold of you. What's the best way to reach you? Is it the website? Is it Twitter? Is it LinkedIn?
For this subject, they can send me an email on Twitter.
Okay.
I'm going to try to show my documentary to a few universities this fall.
Perfect.
It is dense, and it's purposely dense.
Yeah.
Well, I pack a lot of information because I'm trying to make a case. But the reason why I make it is not dense as it's stupid, but there's a lot of information there because if you're watching online, you can stop it. And I try to give you links to the stories that are related to the stories that I've covered, so you can check it out for yourself. Form your own opinions. This is what I see. Doesn't mean that I'm going to be completely right, because what I've done is a top-down analysis. I've looked at the news stories, and these are the conditions that I see creating the racism, and the outcomes are the tragedies that dominate the news. And how can we change them? What I was going to do is a PhD dissertation, and maybe I'll do it at another school one of these days, is to do a bottom-up analysis where I look at each one of the components or the symptoms of racism, and to talk to people not about what happened to them. I'm not going to force them to discuss the pain. I'm going to ask them, so why do you think that these people thought it was okay?
No.
What was being done to you? Why do you think there's nothing wrong with you? Let's get over this. They did awful things. Great. Okay, so what were they saying to you? What were some of the things that they believed? Because we, as Canadians, we have to understand some of the things that we believe that enabled us to do it. We have to change those beliefs to make sure that we're not doing it. We can't have CBC, Hockey Night in Canada, broadcasting the fucking Blackhawks anymore. And the guys at CBC's got to say, listen, we say all this bullshit all the time. We do shed the tear whenever convenient, and we cry about the Diversity Alliance. Well, guys, this wouldn't be appropriate if that was a Chinese team. It wouldn't be appropriate if it was a black team or a women's team. Why is it doing? And if you make the choice that it's only appropriate for an Indigenous person, you're racist. It's fundamentally a racist decision. And if you don't see it and you don't have the balls, well, you don't have the courage, again, let's not slip into misogyny, but if you don't have the courage to stand up and say, this is what I believe and this is how I believe Canada is, then you're just a cop standing up with your hands in your belt, folding your arms, just watching someone die. And there are people dying because of racism. It's not like there's not. And there are people dying. It's just like whether it's suicide or whether it's neglect or whether it's in prison. Like when I mentioned the kid, Adam Capet, who was in solitary confinement for 1,600 days.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention Beatrice Hunter. It was about my age. She was the lady that was arrested in protesting the Lower Churchill. And she was on public land. They took her for, I think, a month or two, and they brought her down to St. John's when she waited in the jail for 2 months. She was a grandmother, mother. She was down there for 2 months, and I contacted her. I said, Beatrice, can I use a picture in this documentary? She said, no, it hurts too much. And I'm not trying to prolong their hurt. It's just like, and I didn't want to do it because it was a personal choice. And if other people had said no, I probably would have taken it out too. But we got to start taking a look. What the fuck are we doing? Just what the fuck are you doing, buddy?
Yeah.
It's just like, stop. Stop trying to make up, say, well, it's like the Human Rights Commission is just like, well, this and this and this, and I don't see that evil. And it's okay because he said it on a Monday at 3 p.m., or it's the latitude. He said it less than when he was south of Thunder Bay, so it's not racist south of Thunder Bay. It's only racist north of Thunder Bay. It's just bullshit. It's just cut the bullshit. What's right is right. What's wrong is wrong.
100%.
And you either stand up for what you believe in, or it's all bullshit. And if you don't, and the worst point is that the Human Rights Tribunal and the Human Rights Courts are not there to protect the people's rights. They are there to confirm order. And if you don't have the ability to complain without fear of retribution, without fear of being targeted and fear of harassment, then you don't have any human rights. And if you don't have human rights, This is not much of a democracy. Canada is not much. You make the decision. Canada is going to go away soon. Either makes a decision on what it is, or it's just going to go away. Because it's just like, don't be thinking that people are complacent all the time. We're just going to put up with it. Because this does not have to be this way.
Right.
We don't have to continue this way. People will make choices. Either you become and stand up for people and say, this is what we believe, this is what's good, this is who we are, or people are just going to say, look for options.
Yep.
It's just like HBO. It's just like HBO is great. Starts producing shitty shows. It's just like, oh, what's on Netflix?
Yep. Well, and they're all going to be producing shitty shows now that all the actors and the writers are all on strike. So good luck to the networks.
Maybe you could watch this movie because there's nothing new coming on TV.
There you go. See, there's a great plug, great chance to check out Systemic Injustice, available on Tubi as well as on YouTube and on Brad's site, beyondgreenconsulting.com. Brad, again, last thing.
It's coming on Cineverse soon. It's on Mobetu and it's on Woco TV in Europe. And I might see if I can get some money to do some marketing. I think people could watch it, not because I'm right. There's some right things to say, but start a discussion. Tell me why I'm wrong, and back it up because, I got some fairly good research on it.
Yeah, you did some great work on that, and did great work again tonight. Thank you, Brad, for joining us, and we will we'll follow up if you've got any want to do promotion or you got the premieres on networks or whatever. Reach out. We'll have you back on, and we can continue the conversation.
Absolutely, and if I get out, I'm going to speak to the universities in Alberta. And if I get out and I get to show it at a university in Alberta, I'd say it's about 20% chance, and we'll chat again.
Sounds good.
People are all right. People want to live in a nice place.
100%. And what you're doing here is going to make it happen.
Oh, thank you very much. And I hope people, you're not going to, the movie's not meant to enjoy, but watch it.
There you go.
It's meant to make you think. It's just, we could be better, guys. Just be
absolutely better. Well, we're going to let you go. Thanks again, Brad, and we will chat soon. That was Brad Glant on the fantastic documentary Systemic Injustice. Links are in the show notes here. You can go to beyondgreenconsulting.com to check out other links, as well as we're going to share this. We took them off, but we have the link there. We're going to share the screen. You can take a look at if you saw Brad was wearing the shirt. So you can actually get your Systemic Injustice t-shirts there from the website, as well as some other merch. And speaking of merch, we are wearing tonight, we wear a orange shirt on a regular basis, not just the days that the government tell us to. And the orange shirt and the black bear claw that we own on our apparel is done by our friends at Wolfpack Apparel, and you can purchase them directly from wolfpackapparel.ca, and we've got the link there. It just got posted. Everything's a little slower tonight, and so yes. And then if you want to support the show, always can visit our website at co-fi.com/talking truth, and just added a couple of new items for you Americans. Bidenomics is just blue mega bullshit, and that's a nice beer stein for our friends at Punch Up Pod, as well as the one that hits home for me, my wife. We both have invisible illness. Invisible illness is, and if you read inside there, we did it so we don't get banned. Invisible illness is a mind fuck, and you can get that in a coffee mug, in a t-shirt, as well as the beer stein. And we've all the proceeds go to the show, so we appreciate that. Appreciate you watching. Oh, the other one we did, we had the Proud to Be Everything conservative. Now it's Proud to Be Everything capitalists hate, because, well, no shit, people that are capitalists do not like me very much, because I am anti-capitalist. But in this capitalist system, well, we got to do what we can. So if you want to be proud to be everything capitalist hate, pick up the shirts. They are quality shirts done from our print suppliers. That is an Iranian family-owned operation in the Greater Toronto, Ontario, Canada area. And again, all proceeds go to our show. Like, subscribe, all those different things. You can see all our links across the board. If you comment on the show, if you like it, hated it, whatever, leave a comment. We love to love your response. We love to have engagement. The goal is to talk truth in an uncomfortable topics in a comfortable environment. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you all again next time.